All right, so check this out, man. You know how we've all heard the story of Noah, all right? The guy with the ark, the animals, the giant flood, two of every species, that whole thing growing up, especially in the West. Most people know the biblical version from Sunday school or movies like that, Russell Crowe flick, right? It's kind of like this pop culture myth at this point. Massive boat animals lining up like it's a VIP party, and this old guy building a ship in his backyard while everyone calls him crazy. But here's the thing, I started digging into this recently, and dude, Islam has a completely different take on Noah, like fundamentally different in some ways. And honestly way deeper than what I thought. The more I read about it, the more it blew my mind because in Islam, Noah in Arabic isn't just some random old man who survived a flood. He's one of the greatest prophets ever. He's like right up there with Abraham, Moses, and Muhammad. And when you read about him in the Quran, it's not just about the flood or saving animals. It's about perseverance, patience, and this insane level of commitment to his people. And when I say insane, I mean, the dude preached for 950 years. 950 years. Let that sink in. So today, I want to break this down podcast. We're going to look at what Islam actually says about Noah, why his story is so important, and what it means beyond the kids' version we all grew up with. And I'm telling you, some of this is going to shock you because when I first read it, I was like, wait a sec, this is way more hardcore than what I've been told. How I even got into this. Okay, so a little background first. You guys know me. I'm curious as hell about everything. Religion, philosophy, ancient history. I've had so many guests on who touched on these topics, but I realized I've talked about Christianity a lot, Buddhism, even psychedelics and their connection to spirituality, but I never really looked at Islam from the inside. Like, what does the Quran actually say? Not what Fox News says, not what some extremist interpretation says, but the actual text and how Muslims see it. So I started reading translations of the Quran, checking out some tafsir, which is like Islamic commentary, and listening to scholars explain the meaning. When you dive in, dude, it's like this completely different lens on stories you thought you knew. Noah's story is one of the biggest examples. The Quran doesn't waste time on little side details like what kind of wood he used for the ark. It's more focused on the message, the dialogue between Noah and his people, the struggle he went through, and the moral lessons. And that just hit me because it's not just a story, it's like this intense drama about human nature and stubbornness. The basics, who was Noah in Islam? So in Islam, Noah is called No, and he's not just a good guy, he's a prophet, one of the elite group called Ulul Azim. These are like the top tier prophets, the ones who had the most challenging missions. And his mission was to convince a society that was drowning literally and spiritually in corruption to turn back to one God. They were worshiping idols, living wild. And Noah shows up like, guys, you need to stop this. There's a God who created you, and you need to follow him or things are going to get really bad. Now here's where it gets crazy. He wasn't just preaching for a few years. He wasn't like, all right, I'll give this a shot for a decade and then I'm out. Nope. Dude stuck with it for almost a millennium. 950 years of getting rejected, mocked, and humiliated by his own people. Like, imagine trying to convince someone of something for 9 centuries. I can't even convince people to try elk meat, and that's just one conversation. This guy is out here generation after generation saying the same thing, knowing most people are laughing at him. That level of persistence, that's superhuman, man. The Quran's version of Noah's mission. In the Quran, there's actually a whole chapter called Surah No, chapter 71. And it's basically Noah talking to his people. Let me give you a taste of that because the language is wild. It's like, oh my people, I am a clear warner to you. Worship God, fear him, and obey me. And then he says, God will forgive you your sins and delay your death until a specified time. That's the vibe. It's urgent, it's heartfelt, and you can feel his frustration because these people are just not listening. What's interesting is that in Islam, prophets don't come with the goal of starting a new religion. They're not like, hey, I invented this new thing called Noah. No, they're there to remind people of the same truth every prophet came with: worship one God, be just, take care of each other. And Noah was basically sent to reboot humanity, to stop them from destroying themselves spiritually. But humans being humans, they were like, nah, we're good. We've got these idols and they've been working out for us just fine. The idols and the corruption. This part's fascinating. Islamic sources talk about how Noah's people worshipped idols named Wad, Suaz, Yaguth, Yayok, and Nasser. And these weren't just random statues. They started as statues of good people who had died, like community leaders. People made these as a way to honor them, but over time that respect turned into worship. Sound familiar? It's like a psychological pattern in human history. When you lose the connection to the core message, you start clinging to symbols. Next thing you know, the symbols become the thing you worship. So Noah comes in and says, stop this. Go back to the source. Stop giving power to things that don't deserve it. But these people were like, dude, you're crazy. We're not changing our ways because some old guy says so. And not just that, they actively mocked him. They called him a liar, said he was delusional, maybe even possessed. Imagine dedicating your life to something, and people not only ignore you but ridicule you for it. For centuries. The emotional side, Noah as a human. What really struck me about the Islamic version is how human Noah feels. Like this isn't just some mythical the Quran shows his pain. There's a verse where he basically cries out to God like, I've called them day and night, and the more I call them, the more they run away. That's heartbreaking, man. Think about what that does to you mentally. 900. It's not like he had Twitter followers to hype him up or a podcast audience to keep him motivated. It was just him, his faith, and people constantly slamming the door in his face. And yet, he kept going. That's insane resilience. All right, so if you've been following along, we've already covered the crazy persistence of Noah, 950 years. Man, that's like the ultimate endurance challenge. We talked about his mission, how his people were straight up mocking him while he's just trying to save their lives, and how the Quran portrays him as this relentless, almost superhuman figure. But now we get into the part everyone knows, or at least thinks they know, the flood, you know, the animals, the ark, the giant storm wiping everything out. But here's the thing, the Islamic version of the story has layers, man. It's not just a disaster movie scene. It's got symbolism, deep moral lessons, and even some shocking family drama. The flood, how Islam tells it. So in Islam, the flood wasn't just some random act of God wiping the slate clean because he was bored. It was a direct consequence of centuries of corruption, arrogance, and refusal to change. Noah warned his people, like, if you don't stop this, something bad is coming. And they laughed at him. In the Quran, there's a verse where they literally say something like, bring the punishment you're threatening us with if you're telling the truth. That's some hardcore arrogance right there. They basically dared him, and in their minds, they were like, this guy's been saying this for hundreds of years. Nothing's happened. He's a joke. And then boom, signs start appearing, rain that doesn't stop, water gushing out from the earth, not just coming from the sky, but from beneath your feet. Imagine that. The ground starts cracking open, water shooting out like geysers. It's apocalyptic, man. And Noah, he's been building that ark this whole time, getting mocked for it. People were like, bro, what's with the giant wooden thing in your yard? You building a yacht? And Noah's like, you'll see. And then one day the thing he's been warning about actually happens. The ark, not just a boat. Let's talk about the ark for a sec. In Islam, the Quran doesn't give you every detail about how big it was or how many cubits of wood he used. It's not about engineering specs. It's about the purpose of it. God commands Noah to build it under his guidance, and Noah does. And here's something wild. In the Quran, it's described as being built with God's inspiration, almost like Noah was being guided step by step. The whole thing becomes this symbol of salvation, not because the wood is magic, but because it represents obedience to God in a world full of chaos. And yes, he takes animals with him, pairs of them. That's mentioned in the Quran too, but the focus is on the believers, the small group of people who actually listen to him. After nearly a millennium of preaching, you'd think he'd have thousands of followers, right? No, just a handful. Think about that for a second. 950 years, and the result is a tiny group. Most of us would have quit after 10 years, but this guy, he stays in the game until the very end. The family drama, the son who refused. Here's the part that really hits me. Even one of Noah's own sons didn't make it. Yeah, that's in the Quran. When the flood starts, Noah calls out to his son, like, come on, get on the ark. And his son says, nah, I'll go climb a mountain, I'll be fine. And Noah's like, there's no protection from this except with God. But the kid doesn't listen, and the waves take him. Dude, imagine what that does to a father. You've been preaching your whole life, and when the moment of truth comes, your own flesh and blood says, no thanks. That's brutal. That's a lesson right there. Guidance is in God's hands, not ours. You can warn, you can teach, you can plead, but at the end of the day, every person makes their own choice. The aftermath, humanity starts over. So the flood wipes out the disbelievers, and the ark comes to rest on a mountain, Al-Judi according to the Quran. Humanity basically gets a reboot. Noah and his followers become the ancestors of the next generation. And here's what's fascinating. In Islam, this whole thing isn't painted as some fairy tale. It's treated like a serious historical event with real moral weight. The Quran even says, "We left it as a sign, so will anyone take heed." It's like this giant warning to future generations. Don't repeat the same mistakes. Symbolism and lessons. Okay, so what's the big picture here? For Muslims, Noah's story isn't just old guy builds a boat. It's about resilience, faith, and the reality of accountability. It's about how societies decay when they ignore truth, how arrogance blinds people, and how change takes insane patience. And honestly, you can see parallels today. People warn about climate change, pandemics, moral corruption, you name it, and most folks roll their eyes. We think we're invincible because we've got technology, but nature humbles us real quick. That's the kind of thing Noah's story screams. Don't get cocky, don't ignore the warnings. What about science? Flood myths everywhere. Now here's where my brain goes. Because I know some of you are like, Joe, come on, global flood? Really? But check this out. Almost every ancient civilization has some version of a flood story. The Mesopotamians had the Epic of Gilgamesh. The Bible has its version. Hindus have the story of Manu. Native Americans have their own versions. That's not a coincidence. Either everyone had the same wild imagination, or something big actually went down. Some scientists talk about massive floods during the end of the Ice Age, when glaciers melted. Others point to local floods that were so catastrophic they felt global to the people living there. But the point is, this idea of a flood reshaping humanity is baked into human memory. And Islam's take fits into that, but with this spiritual narrative that makes it about more than just water. Why the Islamic version stands out, what I find super compelling, is the emotional depth in the Islamic version. The Quran doesn't glamorize. It doesn't make Noah into a Hollywood hero. He's just this deeply human figure doing everything he can to save people, and most of them don't care. That hits different because it feels real. It's not a neat, happy ending story. It's messy. There's tragedy, heartbreak, and this raw reminder that life is about choices. And it's not just about ancient history, it's a metaphor for today. Every generation has its own arc moments, times when you have to decide whether you're going to stick with the truth or go with the crowd. Joe's final thoughts. So what do I take from all this? Honestly, I think it's a call to humility. Whether you believe in God or not, this story is saying something about the human condition. We get arrogant, we ignore warnings, and then we act shocked when everything collapses. And the people who see it coming, they usually look crazy until they're proven right. Noah was the ultimate example of that. The guy literally spent his life preparing for something everyone else thought was impossible. And when it happened, it was too late for most people. That's heavy, man.